Hi everyone, let me ask you a question. Do you sometimes feel that your communication is just not effective enough? Perhaps you feel like there's a breakdown in communication, people's eyes maybe glaze over, you're not getting your point across, you're not articulating what it is you want to say very effectively. Hi, I'm Kim from Kim Taylor, Ultimate Speaker, and I'm here with another episode of the Ultimate Speaker TV to share with you some great strategies and tips to help you with your communication. So if you can relate to any of those things, I just wonder where you can relate. Because when it comes to a breakdown in communication, and this is what we're going to focus on today, is the topic of how to communicate effectively and how this one thing that we're doing can really create that miscommunication and how people just don't relate to what we're saying. And the thing is, when miscommunication can happen in so many areas. It can be your networking conversations, it can be when you're going for an interview, maybe you're looking at writing the marketing copy, the words for blogs or posts or wherever it is for your business. Maybe it's just you're standing up public speaking and you're wanting to deliver a talk to a specific groups, or maybe it's just a one-on-one conversation with someone and you just feel like there's a breakdown in communication. So let's focus on what you can do and what that particular thing is that's actually happening. So a funny thing is, I asked Chris, my husband, just earlier if he had an example of where our miscommunication might happen. So he had one straight away, funnily enough, and he said yes, because he's a great cook, you see. So he cooks these beautiful meals and dinner time. And of course, I get very focused on my work, and if I'm working a little bit late, then he says to me, he says, okay, so dinner's a few minutes away. And I'll go, rightio, that's good. And he'll say, okay, dinner's out. So I interpret dinner's a few minutes away that I've got like 30 minutes before dinner. And he's going, no, dinner's now. Dinner means now. And when he says dinner's out, I'm thinking, oh, I've still got a couple more minutes. So it's really, really rude of me, I know. But it's like that breakdown in communication can happen because we're thinking that it's something different. And this is what can happen when we're talking with someone, and it can feel really frustrating, especially when we're speaking with maybe a potential client, and we really feel like there's a connection with them. We feel like there's good rapport and possibility there, and we know that we can help them, and yet they don't move on to work with us, and that can feel really frustrating. So the Brevet statistic, I've actually got it here, says that only 13% of customers, of clients, actually feel like the salesperson has an understanding of their needs. Now that's really interesting, isn't it? They're a B2B sales consulting organization that looks at the gap between the strategy and the implementation. So really very, very well-renowned group. So this is one from one of their statistics. And I find that, most people, including potential clients, they won't spend, and this is a fact, they won't spend time or money with you unless that rapport is strong. So they're essentially thinking to themselves, do I know you? Do I like you? Are you going to look after me? Are you going to look after my needs? And if you don't have that really strong rapport with them, then they're not going to be listening. They're not going to go any further with you. So rapport needs to be really, really strong. And one of the key things that happens, which is what I'd love to focus on with you right now, is that when that happens, there's a few things that are involved here, but one of the major things that you can start looking at is, what are the words that you're using? Now, the reason why I share this is that the key, often what we'll do is we use our language because we're used to our language, and we'll go into a bit around the different styles of language in a moment. But we have our own preferred way of speaking and communicating with the world. And if we want to communicate with the world and we keep doing it our way, then there can be a breakdown because there are 8 other different styles of communicating with the world. So how do we overcome this? Well, we've got to really listen to what someone's saying. Be really present and listen to the words that they are saying. Now, this is, and the key here is to actually use the exact words that they are using. So if they're talking about well, actually, here's an example. We had a nursery, a wholesale plant nursery. Now, we were selling to all of the chain stores, the Big W's, the BBC Hardware, Franklin's, all of those when they were around, and we were supplying our gingers, ornamental gingers. Now, when I'd go into the nursery and I would talk to the buyers with the display plants that I'd come in with come in through with the truck, and we'd have a conversation. Now, if one of the plant lines that we did grow, apart from gingers, which is a tropical plant, were clivias. Now, they're often referred to as clivias. Now, whatever the buyer would say, be it clivia or clivia, I would adapt my communication. My natural way to say it is clivia, but sometimes people would say clivia. Both are fine, both are correct, but I didn't go out and correct them and say, hey, it's clivia. I would just go, yeah, cool, let's talk about the clivias, and I would immediately adapt my communication to that. It's the same with the word. Some people would say hibiscus. It depends. If I started to correct them and my ego pops in, that's all, because that's all it really is getting it right or unaware, then it just means there's going to be a breakdown in communication. And this is the miscommunication that can be really resolved very quickly just by being present and listening. In fact, there's a great quote by Jennifer Dip Stratton, and she's the CEO of High Ticket Success Sales, and she's a really, really savvy lady. And what she talks about is that, in fact, I have the quote here. Oh yes, one of the things you can really do to minimize the amount of communication is actually use your clients, your customers' words, their exact words, which is what we're talking about with the Bunnings and the chain store example. Use their exact words, because essentially what you're sharing with them is that, actually, I appreciate your way of communicating with the world. I appreciate with the way that you go about how you talk and how you communicate with others. And so what you're doing is showing your appreciation for that. And Tony Robbins talks about this. We need to appreciate the other's way of communicating with the world, how they view the world, and then adapt our communication accordingly, which is a beautiful thing to do for someone in actual fact, because they really feel like that know-like trust is strong, that rapport is strong. And essentially, if that rapport is not strong, then they won't move forward with you. People will not put time, money, effort, energy into conversations, be it personal or professional, if they don't feel that there's a rapport with you. So it's such a key thing to remember. Was there something else I was going to share with you? No, that's about it. That's about it. So what I'm going to ask you to do and really invite you to do is listen, be present, and adapt your communication. Listen for how people are doing it. And to give you an example of this, and I've just printed this out because it's one of the handouts. I use this around adapting communication and the foils of miscommunication in all of my trainings, just about all of my trainings when I'm working with clients, and to help them to see that actually perhaps your preferred modality of communicating with the world is visual. So you see things in pictures. You might imagine how something is, or you might see the world in color. You might imagine, you might visualize, do you see what I mean? Do you, that's another one. I've got a list here. Okay, is that clear? Can actually be a visual word. So what we want to do, if you're speaking with someone who's perhaps auditory, now auditory people will use words like, oh yes, that rings a bell, or I hear you. And so could you just lend me an ear and just explain that a bit more? I'm making that one up. But you've got the idea that it's auditory words that people are using. So you're listening for those key words. So in that example, for example, it would be, I wouldn't turn around if I'm highly visual and they're auditory and they hear things through tone and through their ears, they're not picturing things at all, then I would say, okay, so let's have a look at how this sounds for you. So if we look at the framework and we look at the steps, you can bring in that. Would that ring a bell if we look back at that example? As I say, I'm thinking about this, I'm thinking on my feet, just using examples, but I'm not using visual language, I'm using auditory language. A kinesthetic person, for example, really deep dives into the feeling of things. It's very intuitive, they go by their gut, and it's got to feel right for them. Now again, because I'm highly visual, if I'm talking about things in pictures and, an example being, it appears to me that there's, this is where we're going with this, appears visual. Instead, I would adapt someone who's a feeling person into words, and I'm listening for their words so that I can use their exact words back to them, just like we've been talking. I would use something like, so it feels like what's happening here is you're needing a framework, or you're needing more clarity, or there's a sense of more understanding needed. Would that be correct? Or something like that. So again, I've adapted my language to them. Such a key thing, such a key thing. Another learning style might be auditory digital. I've just got the list here. As I say, you're very, very welcome to have this. It's a list of all the different words so that you've got ideas, so that you can practice listening in with your ear. And so another one might be auditory digital. Now, they are thinking things through. They're looking at frameworks. They're looking at systems. So they're taking the whole thing through. And when you can step into the steps, the strategies, the analysis of this, then you're really going to be talking to their language and listening, again, for the type of words they're using, so you can use the same. And then, of course, using those exact words back. So I hope you had some fun with this. I certainly have enjoyed sharing it with you. And let me know if you want this list, and just so that you can practice hearing the different modalities, because everyone is different and there's nine different styles to learn from. So it's about adapting. Let me know. And if you also would like to book a 30-minute strategy session with me, something that will be an opportunity to look at where you're at, where you'd like to be, and what are those steps that you would like in order to improve your communication. Maybe to even explore what's happening for you now if you're having a challenge around this. Really happy to give you some help on that. Okay, so until next Ultimate Speaker episode, take care, have fun, enjoy the sunny weather, and we'll talk soon.